It's Mike Levin, and I'm back streaming after a embarrassing session where I had kept this screen up for the whole time while I was doing the subject, which was object persistence in Python using pickles. So in this video, I make up for that, and I am continuously refining my process. I'm in my very early days of streaming, and I'm trying different locations, different settings. And what I'm not is one of these high-end game streamers who has specialized hardware and an Ethernet connection to their broadband. I'm using wireless on a laptop that's really honestly about 4 years old technology-wise, even though it's Microsoft's top-of-the-line laptop at the moment, one of these portfolio things. I wish I could just hold a mirror up and show it to you. Casual Day Friday, Darth Vader. Figure I'll show my t-shirts, which are oftentimes a feature of my YouTube videos. People like those. And I'm starting out showing the streaming, showing Twitch Studio. I guess what I'm doing is twitching. This is beta software from Amazon to help people who have a difficult time with OBS, like me, have alternatives. Now, I got into trouble a little bit by just minimizing it here and going about my business using that on screen one. I think I do want to keep it full screen, but I want to switch it over to, in this case, screen 7. So I could jump to it like that with the Windows Tab key, or I can just use my Windows Control with the arrow key combinations and go over to it over here whenever I want to. And that'll be like a fun little journey once in a while when I want to check on my streaming. Tab or screen 1, which Tab will show you again how they're laid out. There's Twitch Studio right there. But over here, I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut Control-Alt-T to bring up my full screen text editor. My channel is greatly about, I say full screen text editor, it's terminal. It's a Unix/Linux terminal as provided by Microsoft now in the Microsoft Store. So this upgrades magically as it pushes out upgrades because of how it was installed from the Microsoft Store and not GitHub, which is always an option. And even though it's Microsoft Terminal and it tends to default to open to PowerShell by default, I have mine opening to Ubuntu. And let's see, I go to screen 2. My second keyboard shortcut, Control-Alt-J, launches Jupyter Notebook with its command line Anaconda console window, full screen. And then that opens Chrome, which then drops you directly into my, quote, home location, which is really my, C/user/username in Windows. I do one more click to get into GitHub, and then one more click to get into the repo I was working on when we last left off. I did this one here, persistence.ipynb, which stands for IPython Notebook. We just call it a notebook, these things that come up in the web browser. And I guess I'll do a Windows tab, make sure I am in fact streaming. I am the right display. When last we left off, I had shown how we can import Pickle, the Pickle library that comes with the Python standard library. And then I explained this whole with open thing. So there's an R object that's created here. So now that I've imported Pickle, I'll actually import the requests object as well. With the requests object, which is not part of the Python standard library, but which is part of the Anaconda install, so you'll have it if you're running Python like me, you can pickle, say, a simple dictionary that is a key value dictionary. You can see it's a dict, and when you put the key in, you get the value out. So I am going to do this with open command, with open as, and I'm just going to put a new term in here because it doesn't really matter. Monty Pickle as handle, this is an arbitrary name which reoccurs here. It's a file handle. So this is the same as opening a file. And in modern Python syntax, when you do a with open, the code that gets in that code block is the next series of indented lines. And when it exits that code block, the file close is automatically done. So I have to change that R to an A for this demonstration. I've just pickled that dictionary to the hard drive. And I can demonstrate that to you by going over here, Control-Alt-T, open another terminal window. Some people would propose tmux for doing this sort of stuff, or GNU screen, multiple terminal windows, or just using the terminal's built-in tab feature. Because back here where my first window is, I can add more tabs the way I did for PowerShell to show you that. But the truth is I always keep my journal here, and I keep that journal full screen, and I get ready to do a new journal entry with my little keyboard shortcut like that, and it puts me ready to do this entry here. And I like to keep that dedicated. I don't even like that PowerShell there. Anyway, I have another terminal window open here, and I can CD into prospecting, and I can do an ls, and then you can see my Monty Pickle. That was not there before. I just created that. And that's a very simple pickled object, which I can load back off of the drive by doing the reverse. This is write binary, this is read binary. And I changed this to foo on the last go around just to demonstrate that it's arbitrary what your file handle is. Here it was handle, here it's foo, just to demonstrate it's arbitrary. But now once I did that, I have a B object which I can print the output of by just putting it on a line by itself, and you can see it's that dictionary object, complete with its API and everything. So you put in hello, and it comes out world. So that's on the drive. And an interesting thing to demonstrate here is if I restarted this, you can see these numbers here show in what order things have executed. You can see 1 through 8. I skipped a couple of lines here, which is going to be for the next demonstration. I'm going to do a kernel restart and clear output to show you the trick of why this is on-demand object persistence, where you're actually moving it from in-memory, just in the memory of your computer, to your hard drive or your storage, your persistent storage. The reason this is useful in search engine optimization work is you really don't want to continuously be, I don't think I actually did reset the kernel. It was a trackpad malfunction, or user malfunction on the trackpad. So this restart hopefully will reset all these things to 0. It's taken a long time. Oh, there it goes. There. So sometimes it just takes a little longer than you expect. And the trick here is now I will need the pickle library still there, but now I can do just this block, which loads it off of the hard drive. Now that kernel reset is like a restart of the machine. So that stuff that was in memory before in the B object went out of memory. If I do a little thing above it to try and look at the A object that was set up there originally, since that code hasn't been run to populate this, because this block hasn't been run, there is no A in memory. Error, A not defined. How about B? Will this one run? Yes, because I have unpickled Monty Pickle from the hard drive. So that's object persistence. And then I went on in the last video, which couldn't be really seen that well because I had that graphic up, is I took that same code and I just put it in 2 functions by putting def in front of it and passing it in as an object as parameters with a default name. I now have this API where I can just do the same pickling and unpickling using persist and persists, okay? And then I put that into the Python code. So once Python is imported, I can now do pipulate.persists, drop things in there and pull it out. So that was object persistence, which is actually so necessary for a lot of this work. I feel I didn't do quite as much justice to it as the last video that I demonstrated all of this, where I put this together. But this is the code that imports Pipulate from a child or a sibling location. And since I have this loaded here, I can cd ... then cd into pipdev that I know is there. From there, cd into Pipulate that I know is there, and then I can vim _ init.py and search for persist. And you can see that those functions that I developed in Jupyter Notebook, I basically copy-pasted over here into the Pipulate code with vim, right down to those foos being in there. In fact, I'll clean that up a little bit, because who needs foo in this sort of code? I'll change that back into handle. That's a little bit cleaner. Oh, and that B is not all that great as the return value. So let's change that into return me. I like to use. Whoops. And that makes it pretty clear, you know. It's pretty much the same thing as before, but I put slightly better variable names on it. And you can see here, if you try to pickle an object and you don't give it a file name, it'll use the default file name, default.pickle, which, you know, is good because you can pickle things and retrieve them again later real fast, even if you restart the kernel. But every time you do it, it'll be overwriting that file in that location. So occasionally you want to give it a new file name if you're doing something a little bit more longer term than a quick temporary object retention. So I show how to use it, and I make this a little less messy. So let's see. I really don't need these here anymore, although I'll keep them in here for, you know, education's sake. This is how I load the Pipulate library. I import the Pipulate library from a child or a sibling location directory up, over, and to a location called Pipulate inside pipdev.pipulate. And then I reload it, because that takes the changes that I just made in the file and applies it to the currently loaded into memory Pipulate package. And it takes a little bit of time for Pipulate to load, because it's making sure it has connectivity to the Google services that are so central to so much of the work that we do here. And in fact, you see this message twice because of the import. On the first time running it after a restart, you'll see the message twice, first from this import and then from the reload. Subsequent to that, if you did that over again, you only see it once. Okay. And so the real demonstration here is, let me delete this lower stuff so we can focus on what comes here. I can now do Pipulate dot persist anything I want, and that'll get dropped into the hard drive. If I wanted to put a different dictionary in there, I can put foo : bar. And now if I did x equals Pipulate.persists, because it persists, there's a lot of API issues here. I have to put default.pickle. Now the value of x is that library because it was loaded off of the hard drive in that location, default pickle, right? So now with that in mind, we can import requests. Now we're sitting on top of the request library, which is, again, a third-party package, but it's to improve the API, the interface, the application program interface, to all the tools you use to fetch web pages and stuff. So with this in hand, I can do R equals requests, the name of that package, the get method of the requests package, and then https://www.google.com. And now that is going to create an object in memory, which is of type request.models.response. It's going to have a number of methods that we can find out about by doing help. The help will show you a lot of its stuff, but also, even nicer than help many times, is dir. Dir just gives you a straight up listing of all the stuff that's in there. So having fetched a web page, what do you think is the most useful? Well, you can do r.url and see what web page you actually fetched, but we already know that. Let's do r.text and see, not rext, rorge. It's rext, rorge. And you can see the text of the Google homepage here. Now that's sitting in memory. If I were to restart the kernel, that web page load would be lost, in addition to any valuable information that was in there that you wouldn't want to refetch. So how to avoid the refetch with this persistent stuff? First of all, this click here will turn that between those two views. So that's useful to get it out of the way. Let's do a before and after. We don't need to be in the Pipulate code anymore. In fact, I want to be cd .. prospecting. Clear ls. I'll do a before and after because there's already a SERPs.pickle here because of my last demonstration where you couldn't see the stream. This time I'll do Pipulate.persist because we want it to persist. The R object, and I'll tell it to use file name serps2.pickle. Now you'll notice before and after there is no serps2 here, just serps. Right? Okay. Execute that. There's serps2. It's on the hard drive. It's like database without database. It's as easy as this kind of stuff really should be. So now this is valuable, remember, and it doesn't survive a kernel restart. So here's the R. It's there. I'll do a kernel restart and clear output. Wish there was a keyboard shortcut for that because that's one of my most frequent things I do. This thing I'm in is called Jupyter Notebook. It's a read eval print loop or REPL environment. That means the code is always actually kind of running and goes into a frozen state in between running code. And after you restart the kernel, all the values are blank. So R is not defined. So if I want to say R equals, get it back into memory, right? That's the idea here. Pipulate.persists, because you know it persists. Nicknames are important. It's not the purest API in the world, but it's the easiest to remember. It's an 80-20 rule compromise, persistence for humans. So pipulate.persists, and we know it's in a file called serps2.pickle. Oh, Pipulate is not defined. Of course, you got to re-import Pipulate after a kernel restart. Oh, and I want to import Pipulate the way that I do it here to get it out of the parallel directory because I haven't put it into the version of Pipulate that's in PyPy yet, PYPI, the Python packaging index. So now Pipulate is in memory, and we can pull the serps2 value back off of the hard drive, print R by itself. There it is again, r.text. There's the home page of Google right there, and you can see it's an identical type as it always used to be. It is, in fact, a requests response object, even though I pulled it off of the hard drive after essentially a reboot of the Python virtual machine. That is persistence and object serialization. And it's such a small seeming thing, but it's such a big part of SEO work. So remember, when people are talking about Python for SEO, and here, let me get Art Rage into this now. I'm getting my techniques for doing all this streaming stuff down and what my shtick is in real time as we go. With each video, me trying to put some innovation or refinement into the process. So, this might not be fast enough. I might end up going to something else for just typical drawing, but this is, SEO, because that's my field, search engine optimization, which is always evolving and growing. The latest thing that's changing stuff is the BERT algorithm, because it puts stuff in context. Words are their order and their order in a sentence alters the meaning. People are giving examples. The bank by the river. Google used to just show banks that were by the river and not understand the context of river banks. So anyway, Google's getting smarter. SEO is changing. It's always changing. Circa 2006, I did hit tail. Me equals hit tail. Oh, this is not going to be the way I do it. But I did hit tail, and that was the long tail of optimization. It's an approach to SEO where you come in where it's easier to get in, because no one thinks to target exactly the word combinations that users are actually using. So that was a long time ago. We're in 2020, so however many years that was ago, I did some really interesting things for SEO. And now this go around, let's see, what's the point I'm trying to make here? When people talk about Python for SEO, that's sort of a big new thing, right? Painting, okay. It's Python for SEO. For SEO. They're going to be doing these polished examples, giving you all these things, but if they don't start talking about things like why Python's built-in object persistence is a benefit for SEO, because without even a database, you can still cache SERPs, which is what you want to do, because I should probably be doing this in my journal where I could just write it out, but I need to get my practice in with Art Rage. You can still cache your SERPs so that you don't have to keep re-executing your query against Google. You'll see I don't actually have a query in here, it's just the Google homepage. But coming up next, we're going to actually put the query in there and parse the search results. We're going to pickle a bunch of stuff, including the whole requests object, like I'm doing here, so I can always go back and learn other things. But I'll also be extracting the key value. I'll be extracting the search positions on a keyword of a search into something like a list of tuples coming up in the next video. And this video is really just to get the object persistence part down, since I sort of messed that up in my last video. And since it's a foundational building block, it is just so important. And in fact, because I'm teaching you Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, when is a good time to commit? Now. It's always a good time to commit your changes. So you can do git status and see what changed. And a whole bunch has changed. All these pickle files I really don't want in my GitHub repo, so I can vim.gitignore and add *pickle, save and quit, and then I do another git status, and you'll see that all those pickles are no longer new files, and I have modified git ignore, and I have modified persistence.ipynb. So git commit demonstrated persistence. Git push. I'll probably be changing the name of this repo from prospecting to something that makes more sense in the context of this tutorial. In fact, let me make that my last thing, because there's always, in tech, there's always these tiny little details, and I'm going to put that in the journal. In tech, there's always these tiny little details that most people making tutorials neglect to talk about or edit out in post-production. While doing live Twitch, I can't. So here's the sausage factory. First thing, we don't want to really ever rename here where it's so easy to do, because it gets out of sync with Git. In fact, it's not a file inside the repo that I'm renaming, it's the whole friggin' repo. So there's two places we want to do that. We want to move the directory prospecting to whatever I'm going to be promoting this as and sharing it with the world over GitHub. I suppose it's going to be prospecting. Let's see. Python SEO. Permission denied. I'm sure I have something loaded into it. Of course I do this here. So we have to close and halt. Execute that command again. Now ls, I have a directory called Python SEO. Python SEO. Okay, so there's a few more steps in order to really change the repo name. Here it is in GitHub. I made a shortcut for it. And page not found. Oh yeah, of course, because that's not my GitHub one. That was my local one, and I just changed that address to Python SEO. So you're seeing a message from the Jupyter Notebook terminal that's here. In fact, somewhere around here you would see the file not found, no such file or directory. So this is the console output. This is a concept that will reoccur a lot. Having console output and logging that is mirrored or echoed to a console output, so you can see what's going on things that are running in a very server-like context. So I bring that to your attention. You don't have to know about it in Jupyter Notebook, except to deal with the fact it's there. But it's good to notice, because we're going to be using similar techniques as we continue and develop. So what I really want to do is to go to github.com/mclevin/prospecting, and I want to edit this file. Let's not edit this file. I want to hit the edit and rename the repo. I guess that's in the settings for the repo. Prospecting becomes Python SEO. Rename. And that is not quite all. There's a command, and this is where I'll teach you about something I do in my journal. I keep one journal forever in Vim. This just keeps getting longer and longer. And I can just hit Shift-G to drop to the bottom of the file where I keep all my neat tricks. And one of these tricks that needs to be understood, and you can see it's the very bottom one, I use it that much. So this is git remote add origin, I want to change the origin. So I will, in fact, do a search. Git change origin. Because when I push, it's got to push to the correct location on GitHub. And currently, internal in the repo is knowledge that it's still in the prospecting directory. Now, to change the prospecting directory to something different, Git, and I'll add this, you'll see how I work. This is a nice, important piece of information. To change origin, and then we would use this sort of syntax. I didn't have to do that with Vim. You can use Vim's internal buffers. V shift4 yank shift4 p www cw Python SEO. Okay. So that's the one I want to use. So now I'll use the operating system's copy buffer. Oops. Again, I know this is sometimes frustrating to watch, but it's no worse with mouse and keyboard, please. Anyway, I have the thing to type now to change the origin of the repo, which I'll have to do from inside the new Python SEO folder. That should change the origin. Now if I do a git push, well, let's do a before and after first. Here we are in the repo. And I've already changed my path over here. And demonstrated persistence, this is the first file, renamed notebook. Do my push. Everything up to date. Interesting. Git status. Oh yeah, because I didn't do a commit. Git commit. Demonstrated persistence to streaming audience. Git push. That's real recognizable, right? Control R. Oh, it's saying everything is up to date. That is, oh, that's just not in the repo. It's not tracked. Git add persistence. So those commits were really meaningless without that file being added, that persistence file. Git commit, demoed persistence. Third time's the charm. Git push. That looks more like it. Now we've got a before and after. Demoed persistence and some other files showing up. I'll do some cleanup because we really don't need the foo.py. So we do git remove foo.py. A lot of the commands that are normally used directly through the operating system, through Linux, like rm, I could have removed the file with just rm. You want to go through git first, the git version of remove, because it is tracked in this git repo named Python SEO inside the GitHub location. And so when you do stuff to alter this, you don't want to do it outside of Git, or it won't know, or it will know, and you have to, re-add files and delete files, and it throws off the continuity. So git status, it'll show me one file was deleted. Git commit, deleted foo.py. Git push, you'll see both that comment and the one less file here. See? So this is where I introduced you to Python's Hello World. I think that should be Hello World instead of stream intro. Git move. Hello World pynb git commit remains first file git push. And this starts to look a little bit better for you. Starts to go a little bit better with the lesson that I'm giving you, a whole from scratch on Python for SEO. And first you need to learn a little bit of Python at all. So this is really just a hello world program to let you know. I bring it all the way to fetching the Google homepage. There's a Google homepage. I don't really like that. So what I'm going to do is I am going to load the hello world here along with persistence. See how they're gray? After I load them up, I use the control key when I click them. So even though they're staying gray here, they're loading into memory here. And if I did a refresh here, those gray icons would turn to green because it knows it's in memory. The virtual machines are being spun up. I did it twice, and each of those is a whole Python virtual machine. So once you see the title there, you know it's spun up. We'll wait for the next one to show it the title. Now I do a refresh here, and they are in fact in memory now, which you can confirm by hitting the running tab. It shows only the things that are running. So to get it a little cleaner in the repo, I do kernel restart and clear output. Now this is the problem with IPython notebooks in Git and GitHub, in that every little thing like that creates tons of changes in your code. Now, depending on the nature of the project, you just don't sweat it. Cleaned up HW notebook for VB view, for viewing, for notebook, and NB viewing for notebook viewing, right? So if I push that, whereas it looked so ugly in GitHub before because it was showing the output of the help command here and the home page as it was on Google. Ugh, right? This is an ugly way to see this, but now if I do a refresh on that very same file, it's going to look short and real example-like. It's a good hello world to just get the idea down of what's going on here, importing requests, just printing the fact that you get text. Now, on the same note, I want the persistence one to look nice. Now, this is the real notebook here, and I will just go ahead and kernel restart and clear output. I think I'll be slamming out a lot of these different files instead of continuing the same file. Maybe some numbering system as I go. End up persistence be for NB viewing. Hit push, and now the persistence file will be just as clean. Now you'll notice some things here about how I'm working. Even though GitHub has provided a desktop Git program that you can use, I only ever just do it here. And even though Git is full of all these features, and this looks like so much gobbledygook, that's just because of when you push, all this stuff outputs. Using Python was really much easier. It was this command git push, right? How hard is that? Git space push. The amount of the stuff you need to learn for Git, especially for single user use, keeping your code safe on GitHub, is remarkably less than all the stuff that the tutorials on Git are going to make you think. Git is easy for single user, having infinite undo ability and a little bit of, getting your code out there on GitHub. And if people want to participate and attempt to push up changes and stuff, you're in the position to accept and merge the changes if you like, or just continue working as a one-person developer. Anyway, that sort of gets me back to where we were with object persistence and a little bit of the perpetual housekeeping that needs to be done. This project is now known as Python SEO. And there's a hello world and there's a persistence in there. We are going to move on with probably a SERPs one. And as you noticed, I included persistence into Pipulate, so it's not code that you have to remember and use so much, following its pickle pattern. I actually think I delete. No, it's all up there, so you get to see how it happens without without functions, without even functions. How it works with functions. The persist one I might have deleted. I can clean this all up later. This is live streaming. And then how that eventually gets incorporated into the Pipulate library so that you can use it with extremely simple commands, giving it the full file name for where it ends up on drive, and if you don't, it uses default.pickle. So anyway, that's the end of the stream, and when I come back, I will be ready to actually do some SERP, search engine result execution, and pickling of the result. So it's a one-time dropping it on the drive. You can be very polite to Google. In the future, I'll show you how to do this using actual Chrome automation and the Pipulate library, which is a lightweight wrapper to the Puppeteer Google client library for controlling Chrome through Node.js. So there's a lot more moving parts, and I tend to avoid that if I can, unless Chrome automation is actually required. For the work we're going to be doing, really just this request library is all that's going to be necessary. So we're going to start out with requests and then move on to things like Pipulate. Thanks for joining me. Hope to stream you again soon, and don't forget to follow.